At the helm of implementing the National Space Program is the Philippine Space Agency, or PhilSA, celebrating its 5th year on August 8th. Hello, I'm Iya Gozum and you're watching Rappler Talk. Joining us today is Dr. Joel Joseph Marciano, Director General of PhilSA. Hi, sir. Thanks for joining us today.
Welcome, Iya, and good day to you.
Yeah. And, sir, happy 5th anniversary.
Thank you so much.
That's
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, sir, maybe you can tell us what the first 5 years have been like. What are the roadblocks and also the advantages of being a relatively young agency?
Yeah. Well, where do we begin? No, we were, first of all, I guess at the beginning, I was appointed December 2019, and I assumed the office in March 2020. I believe it was March 4th or March 5th. And we all know what happened then. No? It was soon we went into lockdown because of COVID. So I guess to make a long story short, no, we were building up the agency in the beginning, in the midst of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And as everybody knows, there were lots of challenges and lots of concerns during that time. Understandably, the resources of government were allocated to fighting the pandemic. Yeah. So that presented significant challenges to building an agency from the ground up. Mm-hmm. I was employee number 1, and I say I was one and only employee for several months, mm-hmm. but I had a lot of help. Mm-hmm. And I have to thank DOST, University of the Philippines, because they made people available to help out, mm-hmm. and bring the agency to its feet. Now, so we had volunteers. Yeah. We were doing Zoom calls. So that was a new experience for all of us. But then, on one hand, while you could not meet in person, it allowed ample opportunity to get back to people regularly. Okay. Because we were at home and we were just in front of screens. You don't even have to dress up, with formally.
Or you dress up with your top, but you can
well, I guess that's the secret there. Maybe it's out of view, but no. But yeah, we made that effort to meet with people. Mm-hmm. You could meet with them in the morning. You had a question, then you can call them again in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So in a way, that setup helped out Ren to generate the resources. Mm-hmm. We were talking to DBM, we were talking to the Treasury, we were talking to the Office of the President, various offices there. We were talking to Congress. Mm-hmm. And trying to operationalize the Philippine Space Act. Mm-hmm. Right? And the volunteers, soon enough we had some resources in terms of people. Mm-hmm. So we I hired people, and these were executive assistant positions. But then I hired an engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, and somebody who is, in policy. And planning, especially project management, was absolutely crucial. So they helped out. And yeah, so but there were. Let me say one more thing. Certainly, that environment presented a lot of challenges. Pero we realized the opportunities that came with it. Yeah. Of course, when you think about the pandemic, we were very keen on shining the spotlight on how space technology is, in fact, very relevant and could help out in a situation like that. Okay. And more so...
I was going to ask, was there a disconnect, talking about space technology and then the country undergoing a pandemic, an internal threat?
If we look at it from the point of view of space technology offering us visibility or additional data, the information that we can use for more effective decision making and where resources should go, right, and studying how the economy is affected by the pandemic. Some of these things you can see from space, mm-hmm. right? We were monitoring air quality, water quality, economic activity through night lights, etc. And there is this emerging field of teleepidemiology, where you're using parameters that you measure via remote sensing or other remote instruments such as satellites, to study the spread of diseases through proxies, right? But more than that, we know we were going to get out of the pandemic someday. Yeah. And we have to be prepared. And this capability must be available to us as a country as we recover and as we continue our march towards progress. So then, whatever resources we had then, in terms of people and the experience that they had, we tried to apply it right away. We were on Zoom calls, we were on meetings, presenting ourselves, even sometimes to meetings we were not invited to. We were trying to make sure we join, at least we observe, but if we have a chance to speak, we talk about space technology. But so we were, whatever it is that we had then, gamitin na, no? Apply, talk to people. After all, it's not true you don't have anything. We tell people, what you have it here and here, right? So share that, right? Share it with people. There was not a lot of funding, but we can't discount the value of people and their passion to help out. And then, of course, at the same time, what we were leveraging anong available at that time to contribute, we were making sure that our sights are set for the future.
Okay.
Because ultimately, that's the relevance of a space agency.
The future.
It's
the foresight.
It's foresight. It's thinking about, you have to be forward-looking to have a space agency.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, there are things you can take advantage of now, which we do, which we try our best. But setting our sights in the future, make sure that we don't drop the ball for future generations. Otherwise, they look back at us and say, they did not do that. They did not think about this. They did not think it was important enough, right? And so now look where we are 50 years later. Right. So I think we can contribute to that.
I think, sir, going from what you mentioned earlier, it's a little known fact, no? Kasi when people hear about space or space technology, they always think outwards, no? Space agad or rocket launches, ganyan. But it's a little known fact, I guess, that space technology helps us look in or look inward. When you were mentioning remote sensing, tracking perhaps emissions, human activities, the effects, the impacts of these activities to the economy. Parang that's something I think not a lot of people know, diba?
Because that's really kind of working in the background. Space technologies, to some extent, are invisible technologies. After all, you can't really see the satellites in front of you. They're somewhere out there, but they're doing their jobs. We tell anybody who switched on the light switch this morning has used space technology, because the underlying infrastructure for the power grid relies on precise timing offered by satellites. If you open up your phone and then you launch this app, you're ordering food or ordering transportation, there's these three space technologies working in the background that enable that. Number one, the map on our phone. Right? It's processed from a satellite image or data coming from satellites that are now visualized as maps. Number two, our location on that map is calculated, provided by satellites, these positioning satellites. So that's the second one. Number three, the data that we send over our phone goes to the internet, and part of the internet, especially in remote places, travels through space to reach these places, travels through satellites. So communications in the internet depend to a large extent also on the space segment that we call. And finally, our commute is affected by the weather, and satellites measure weather. So sometimes we get advisories to change your route because of bad weather, or maybe even delay the trip a little bit, or if there's flooded areas overlaid on the map, then satellites can contribute to that information.
Yeah. So, sir, maybe you can tell us more about the progress that we're having now in terms of technology, no? From Diwata, which I think a lot of Filipinos, parang dun nag-spark yung, we're doing something pala with space tech, with space development, to Mula Satellite, which I think will be launched next year or next year, 2025.
2026.
2026.
Okay. Yeah. Well, sige. Yeah. This goes back a little bit. Diwata, it's a 50-kilogram Earth observation satellite. That's more scientific in nature. It carried 4 or 5 cameras. And really, when you look at that, why do you have 4 or 5 cameras there? Because the reason is you want to test every single one of them, because these are novel technologies that we're introducing into this small platform. No? When we think of satellites, we think of spacecraft that are as big as school buses. Yeah. But this one is as big as a balikbayan box. So we were, when we were building it, we were really at that we were riding that wave of this new space movement, where smaller, more inexpensive satellites, which you can produce in larger quantities, were causing a revolution in space infrastructure. Okay. So then, of course, we had a mission. Behind every satellite is a mission. That's crucial. That is the primordial thing. No? What is your space mission? Apart from these cameras being tested, of course, we wanted to get data. We wanted to use these cameras to observe the Earth, particularly our country, and see our country from that perspective in a way that we control and operate ourselves. So there's also that sovereignty aspect of it, where, we have control over the satellite, and not only can we take pictures sa bansa natin, we can take pictures as it orbits the Earth of other countries and contribute that as well to common good. So then we relied on the young people for that satellite. We had nobody with experience building a satellite before. We had the next best thing, people with no experience but were otherwise very eager to learn. So we sent them to Japan, and the Japanese professors mentored them. Some of them are with us right now at the Space Agency. One satellite was not enough, because you could build one off, and you might succeed with that, but you can't prove anything, and you haven't proven anything unless you try to build it again. So from the beginning, we were thinking dalawa yan, and then also accompany that with something perhaps smaller, even a CubeSat, which could be more accessible as we proliferate the know-how here in the country, right? So these larger satellites carry more payloads. The smaller ones, we think more universities could build, right? And even soon, high school students could contribute to this CubeSat. So it's 1 kilogram only. You can fit in the palm of your hand. So that was in a way, the strategy then. Build the slightly larger satellites, gain proficiency in how it operates, in designing the mission of these satellites to cater to our country's needs. And the payloads, the cameras, the radios, you have control over them, and they're generating data. At the same time, there's this downstream naman, when you get the data, you also gain proficiency. You're building this cadre of people that are able to process the data, add value to it, and quite importantly, interface with different groups to get feedback on the data. So that's very important. We can't be just pushing this data. We also have to listen and say, how will these future satellites, so we start with this, but how will the future satellites be able to serve our country better in terms of infrastructure? Okay, so and one thing that we also emphasize, as we build satellites, we have an opportunity to engage local industry.
Okay.
And that's very important. The Philippine Space Act says that we have a central goal of becoming a space-capable, spacefaring nation within the next decade. So 2019 it was signed. That's 2029. It's coming up. So how do we go about that? Well, first of all, look at what spacefaring means. With some definition means spacefaring. We should have astronauts. We should have Filipinos. They were literally walking in space. So that's we'll get there, I think.
We'll get there.
We'll get there, and maybe sooner than we all think, okay, because the opportunities abound. But let me very quickly add to that the astronaut is the lucky person who gets to perform on behalf of the country these meaningful science experiments that will advance know-how of humanity. So we have to back it up with a solid body of science. That's the work that's cut out for us. Choosing the astronaut is the fun part, and probably the easier part. But what will the astronaut do, and what will the next astronaut do? What will the next astronaut? It can't be a one-off. It has to be a program where we have a vision for the country, that to be a spacefaring nation, we're contributing to the sustainability of life on Earth. We're contributing to advancing scientific know-how. Okay, so now the spacefaring part. Of course, that also, in some definitions, also means you have a capacity to bring your own stuff to space, namely rockets. No? And I think there are only 8 or 9 countries that have demonstrated that capability so far, right? But then, probably on a slightly 1 degree lower, spacefaring means you have infrastructure in space that you operate and control yourself, and that's our satellites. So that makes us, in a way, spacefaring. Okay? Because satellites like Diwata 1, Diwata 2 are Maya CubeSats. Tayo nag-operate, tayo nagko-control. So we determine what it does, right? And then, so that makes us, parang the satellite is a proxy for our astronaut right now. Okay, but now the space-capable part. That means industrial capabilities. I think at the end of the day, we need to build this industry, and that's very much embedded in the Philippine space policy. One of our key development areas is space industry capacity building. So connecting that to Diwata, Maya, and now Moola, what we are also trying to do is open the door for local companies to be part of this enterprise. How? We have semiconductor and electronic companies in the Philippines. We have companies here that build photovoltaics or solar panels, wiring harnesses for automotive. There is an aviation. There are aviation companies here that work on qualifying equipment or components for airplanes. So they're not quite space industry, pero we consider them adjacent to it. No? To be part of the space industry, you need to be building and manufacturing products that are space qualified. That means it's rated for space, so to speak. It will survive in that hostile environment. That has to go through testing. May mga, you have to cycle the temperature, and when you cycle the temperature, it has to be in a vacuum environment. No air, simply speaking. No? So that presents challenges. For example, when something heats up, diba, what do we do? Pag naiinitan tayo, nagpapaypay tayo. Paano kung walang hangin? Diba? So how do you aerate, or how do you conduct that? So you have to dissipate that heat within yung body ng satellite. So that presents challenge. We also have to subject it to vibration testing, right? Kasi the satellite will go on a rocket, and that is the first hostile environment it will encounter. When it's on the rocket, it will experience extreme vibrations. You don't want the screws falling off. You don't want things falling off because of shoddy workmanship, or because you didn't realize that you need to do that. So they won't even let you in a rocket if you don't test these things. So we learned a lot of those things, and those are difficult activities that I think will add to the economic complexity of our country in terms of products that we produce. We learn the discipline of building more reliable products. They might be smaller volume, but there could be higher margin for these products. And by building skill and capability in building these difficult products, we can build products for other difficult environments. For example, when you build sensors for mining environments or undersea environments, geothermal wells, places na we put stuff in, but it's very hard or impractical or possibly or quite impossible even to go back and fix it when something goes wrong. It just has to work.
I was actually gonna ask her, parang, how does space technology help the environment? Because I saw, at least in the briefer of the Mula Satellite, na part of its mission is to like map the changes in land use cover.
Yes, that's part of the mission. It has a primarily agricultural mission. So you look at crops, you look at agriculture. The camera that it has, and it is also an innovation. These cameras that are on the satellites see different colors. And when you say colors, we refer to them as wavelengths, and they're very fine colors. And that allows you to distinguish certain parameters in crops, the stages of growth, whether their health, and diseases that might affect them as seen through yung reflectance that they have when we look at them at different wavelengths. Okay. So for us as humans, it's very hard for us to distinguish fake plant from a real plant. Well, I don't know what's your success in guessing that. Or somebody gives you flowers, you smell it. It smells genuine. It looks good, but sometimes it looks fake. But satellites will not have that problem with these cameras. They can see at different colors and distinguish them. So in that sense, we get data. And this data is processed, and it allows us to build maps and monitoring larger areas more frequently over large scale. Because it's not the only solution. You can complement this, of course, with aerial images, with drones, and certainly with measurements ground. The satellite also needs to be validated. Its measurements, it's very important to validate it. You don't have to validate it 100%. You can have samples, sample points in different places, and that's the ground truthing they call. So that's the mission of Moola. I should add, when we build, we're not buying the satellite, we're building it. And when we have 16 engineers now in the UK, in an industrial setting, working with their engineers, and there is know-how transfer there, inherent in that activity. We can remanufacture this satellite in country next time. So that approach opens the door for companies here. We'll invite them. If you can do this better, we'll get that component from you. So there are companies in the space industry that are looking to diversify their supply chains. Right? So they're looking at a country like the Philippines. If there's a company there that can do this component better, perhaps more cost effectively, more reliably, then why don't I get that component into my satellite and use that henceforth?
And then just a related question to Mula's agricultural mission, sir. I think the PhilSA has signed an agreement with the Department of Agriculture to monitor the development of farm-to-market roads. How would you describe the connection between space tech and Filipino farmers and also food security in the country?
But there is a big connection. There's we'd say the potential benefits are significant. First of all, with say agriculture, we look at our partnership with the DA and BAFE in particular is about farm-to-market roads and certain monitoring of certain crops. Space, the satellites, it's the ultimate high ground. I mean, from that vantage point, you can see large areas in more frequently as the satellite keeps going overhead. So it's about providing that visibility and transparency on these activities. So that also entails accountability. So when we invest, our government invests resources and infrastructure, we can use the space segment and data from satellites to assure everybody that resources are going where they should. And that's an important role for our space agency. We're working with the DBM on something similar for monitoring the big ticket infrastructure projects of the government through satellite imagery. So back to agriculture. One way we can help the farmers is to get this data in the hands of groups that directly interface with them. Okay. For example, the DA, right, and the groups that provide crop insurance, the groups that provide financing, right? So that's how we think we can immediately help the farmers, because our farmers, as I understand, they rely on when there's a typhoon that damages crops, then hopefully they can get insurance to recover their losses. So the satellite images in the hands of people who interface with them, who can directly help them, that's a proximate objective. Get it in their hands. So we're trying to work with different groups, DA, even Land Bank, on that front. How do we leverage this technology to enhance our decision making? I should also mention we had a prior effort to our colleagues here working with DSWD, wherein the team generated drought forecasts. So this area, there could be potential drought there. So by generating a map, and the data was coming from satellite measurements, What happened was proactively DSWD reached out to these farmers and gave assistance. So they were ready to give assistance to farmers who would be potentially affected by this drought. So that's another way, when we can predict or forecast such phenomenon through satellite images, then we can be more ready and proactive.
Basically, the work that comes with helping communities and sectors, marginalized sectors in the Philippines are cross-cutting now, from one agency to another.
Well, that's our story. We're all about collaboration. You look at us, we're just a space agency. Yeah, we're just a space agency. What does that mean? You don't really see us because when you think of us, you think of astronauts, you think of rockets, which is good,
Yeah.
right? But then we also work with other agencies in their, I guess you can call it their mandates. No? They know more about agriculture. They know more about the environmental protection. They know more about things like climate change, etc. So our role there is to add this capability to their war chest, to their toolbox.
Let's zoom out a bit, sir. So PhilSA had its Philippines' first space dialogue with the United States this year about maritime domain awareness. Can you tell us more about that? What does it mean for the country?
Right. The U.S. and the Philippines, we've talked about many things. This particular dialogue, well, it was an unprecedented occasion to talk about something new, space. This is the first time we've across the table, the Philippines and U.S. talk about space on a government-to-government level. I think it's a significant milestone in our relations. This was spurred by prior high-level meetings, a 2+2 ministerial meeting, and in September 2022, during the UN General Assembly, President Marcos Jr. mentioned space and how we have aspirations to expand our presence in outer space. Also, how we need to contribute to the norms of responsible behavior in outer space. So that's, in a way, those are directives for us. So we took that to heart, and of course, space brings countries into a constructive discourse, because space as a heritage of humankind. There's one very inspirational saying, I forgot who said it, but all countries share a border, and we share a border in space. Right? Anyway, that's more of the high-level stuff. But what did we talk about? Many things. There's people-to-people exchanges. We talked about infrastructure. We talked about industrial linkages. We talked about, of course, NASA and the wealth of data that they have, and how the Filipino diaspora in the U.S. has contributed to the work of NASA, NOAA, other agencies that deal with space in the U.S. So though we talked for the first time as government to government, it feels like we're talking to a familiar group, because after all, we had people-to-people exchanges already. So infrastructure-wise, that includes, how do we take advantage of their satellites more? We already take advantage of them, but how can we utilize them more? How can we also contribute data and exchange more data? Capacity building fellowships. We just launched, we're about to announce the first batch of PhilSA Fulbright fellows, scholars, who will go to the United States to study space science, technology, policy, diplomacy, space law, space economics. That opens new doors for Filipinos. So there was a lot that we talked about. And of course, the challenge is always operationalizing this. So we'll continue talking. We'll have the next dialogue in the Philippines.
Oh, this year then, sir?
Probably, no, not this year, but perhaps next year, but soon enough, yeah.
Right. And in the near future, sir, are we looking at some sort of an agreement between the two governments?
Well, I think, it's possible, specific to space. I think we're already working under several framework with exchanges with the Philippines and U.S. on a government-to-government basis. There's an S&T framework for that as well. But we can't preclude that possibility of more specific agreements with perhaps with certain agencies in the U.S., whether it's for space situational awareness or Earth observation data, even spaceports. And the possibility of industrial zones in the country, that would cater to space.
So, sir, I have to ask this because I cover this. But is there like an upcoming project that you're working on where we will be able to track our emissions, monitor rising sea levels, the adverse impacts of climate change?
I think there's already ongoing work there through some of our teams, and we are using whatever is available in terms of open data and even commercial subscriptions. Let me mention one program that's ongoing now. This is with the European Commission and the European Space Agency. So they chose the Philippines for this program. It's called the National Copernicus Capacity Support Action Program for the Philippines. In short, it's called COPFIL. And when the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was here last year, was on an official visit, she talked about this project as being the first in space cooperation between Europe and Asia, happening here in the Philippines. Among other things, what will happen is that we are setting up a mirror site. So it's like a data center, which will house the open data from the European Space Agency satellites, particularly the Copernicus Earth Observation System. And their satellites are called Sentinels. We already use them a lot. And they're free, they're open. Anybody can use it, anybody can access it. So this will enable it to be more accessible and more pervasive for use, not just in Metro Manila or in the urban areas, but we want it to be used by local governments, in private sector across our country. So that's a big step for us. It recognizes how we've been adding value to this open data, and precisely for things that you mentioned, greenhouse gases, etc. There are new satellites that they're building. The Europeans, ESA is building, and we hope that will add to the availability of data to be hosted in this mirror site. But right now, as part of this program, we're having 3 pilot services. One is land cover. So land cover is about classifying how land is in a way used, or the characteristics of the land, whether it's for vegetation, what kind of vegetation, bodies of water, etc., crops, mangroves, built-up areas. The next one is ground motion monitoring, ground deformation monitoring. And the third one is on benthic habitats. It's monitoring the marine environment, doing an inventory of corals, seagrasses, and other habitats, marine habitats. So yes, there's ongoing work. I should also mention how we're working with Korea, particularly with the support of KOICA, on accessing data from the satellite that measures air quality. So this satellite offers unprecedented capability in terms of being able to get hourly measurements of air quality all over the Philippines at daytime. So we are also installing ground equipment for 4 or 6 locations around the country, which will work with that satellite to validate the measurements. So this contributes to measuring air quality and how perhaps emissions are affecting air quality and all of that important concerns.
Right. So, sir, I see that as a budding new agency, just established 5 years ago, there are a lot of inaaral pa yung technology, we're training our people, our staff, but also in the international arena, the conversations now, hindi na lang siya about the scientific pursuit in space. It's also become about the commercial ventures. Now we're talking about space tourism, and also there are dialogues and conversations around space debris. So where does the Philippines, where does PhilSA figure in those conversations?
So I think I recall your very first question, what's the advantage of a country, of the Philippines, having a young space agency come in at this stage? Now, there are advantages there, because you get to learn a lot about what happened in the past and what you can do better, and perhaps what not to do or try. But at the same time, when we set up the agency, other countries, the moment they learned that the Philippines has a space agency, the reaction was, congratulations, it's very great, how can I help you? Right? So then we realized, okay, we must be able to help ourselves as well. Now on that note, because other countries engage us, right? So we contribute to the international discourse. So at the heart of that question is sustainability of outer space, outer space activities. You know, talk about space debris, talk about commercial activity, space becoming a contested, congested, competitive domain. Many countries around the world, and that includes the Philippines, recognize space as a strategic domain. Right? We talk about infrastructure, we're familiar with roads, bridges, airports, seaports, but satellites are also part of that infrastructure now. So that environment we have to be proficient in. We have to also build infrastructure that will help our country in that domain. So because of that, because we have a stake in this as well, we engage the international community. We're part of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space in the UN. So we regularly attend their meetings, and we deliver national statements about where we stand on various issues on sustainability and these guidelines, and where do we stand on the weaponization of outer space and all those important concerns. There's another venue which we are a significant part of. This is the open-ended working group in the UN in Geneva on reducing space threats and risks. I should add that last year, during the 3 meetings, we wrote 3 papers. The first one is about the principle of due regard as a foundational principle in outer space activities. Right? The second, which we co-authored with Germany, is a paper on what we consider as irresponsible uses of outer space. The third one is about, again with Germany, Philippines and Germany, is about recommendations on responsible use of outer space. So this, we are taking space diplomacy and space policy to heart. That's something I think Filipinos can really excel in and make a mark in, more so, not just excel, but articulate to the world where the country stands. And we may not have a lot of space infrastructure yet. We don't have a lot of satellites. We don't have, we have ground, but we rely on them significantly. So we have to contribute to the discussion that will determine the sustainability and continued access of all countries to space.
I have to ask, sir, does it feel overwhelming sometimes or a bit jarring to impose a certain level of rules-based order or space diplomacy upon this vast expanse of outer space, di ba?
Yeah, well, this is becoming very serious. No? I know, of course we are. Pero we get a lot of help. The Department of Foreign Affairs and some colleagues from universities here. As I said, we're about collaboration. So in articulating these positions, now that we have a space agency, they come to us and say, okay, explain what are these concepts and what are these things, but they bring their expertise to the table as well. There are parallels, they say, with space and maritime. There's part of that environment, maritime, that's also considered global commons, and right. So then we could learn from that, in how we can try to have binding or enforceable regulations in space. It's a continuing discussion. The most more important thing right now is the Philippines is not absent in the table. We are very much present there, I believe, and we will, of course, to the extent that we can, because we do our best. So we participate in these venues as well. So with the help of our partners in the TFA, our embassies abroad, and our colleagues in the universities here. At the same time, when we talk about the maritime domain, the synergy there is space technology is being relied on to increase the visibility in that domain. Right? What happens in waters, in open seas, etc. You can see them from satellites. So there's that synergy there. I think message that we can promote between maritime and space domain, both crucial to our country.
Right. So just a last question from me, sir. What will be your message to young students who aspire to get into this industry?
Yeah. I'll share with them the mantra that we have at the space agency. So it's 3 words: be a sponge.
Be a sponge. What does that mean, sir?
A sponge, not the marine kind, not the cartoon one, but you know, I can have fun with that. But the sponge is this utility that we all know in our kitchen or garage, etc. That means, what does a sponge? What does it do? It absorbs. Right? We always have to dedicate ourselves to a quest of continuous learning. Even now that we have a space agency, we can't say that we know everything. It's a challenge for us because the environment evolves. Technology sometimes outpaces policy. So we have to not just keep up, but we have to try to get ahead. So that means absorb learnings as much as you can. But that's not enough. The other half of it is you have to learn to apply them. So it's similar to a sponge. When you squeeze it or when you apply it, what do you do with a sponge? You apply it, things become better, cleaner, you improve things. Right? So that's the application part. And with space, there's so many things to learn, just relating it to space. There's plenty of room to innovate, but first of all, we have to learn, we have to open ourselves to absorbing all these new lessons and figuring out how to apply them. And the third part of that is the sponge is a humble utility, right? So you allow yourself to be used because you can create impact that way, and work with a team, right? So a sponge works with other utilities, right? So that you can solve bigger challenges and help build a better nation.
Thank you for that message, sir. Sir, maybe you can plug your events for Philippine Space Week happening now.
Oh, yes, certainly. August 8 to 14, it was declared by the President every year henceforth, starting last year, as Philippine Space Week. We're very fortunate to have this opportunity to celebrate these activities and contributions of Filipinos to space science and technology, not just here in the Philippines, but all over the world. So August 8 to 14, there's a lineup of activities that we're planning. We have other groups as well contributing to this effort. So please, look out for these announcements on Facebook, on our website, on Instagram, all our social media channels. Our theme this year is Yamang Kalawakan ay likas sa ating bagong Pilipinas. So that means Yamang Kalawakan is this collective resources and capabilities of our people, our infrastructure, the environment that harnesses the wealth of opportunities offered by space, this new global space economy. So our country can contribute to that. So that's our call, and stand by for all these fun activities, and let's have fun and let's learn at the same time.
All right. Thank you, sir. If you're just tuning in, we've been speaking with Dr. Joel Joseph Marciano of PhilSA. For more news and updates, join the environment chat room of the Rappler Communities app. You can download it on iOS and Android. You can also visit communities.rappler.com. Again, I'm Iya Gozum. Thank you for watching.